people, it's Christina from Her Gifted Hands, and I'm here to finally show you how to make the Juice Carton Purse. So in today's tutorial, this is going to be the full-size version of the Juice Carton. If you didn't know, it actually comes in two sizes. There are two versions of it. So you have the mini and you have the full size. We call this one the Pipsqueak because she's petite, she's cute, and she's also sweet. So we call her the Pipsqueak. Now, this video is in collaboration with the Spooky Sewing Marathon going on this month of October. So I would greatly appreciate it if you checked out all the other makers and creators that have participated, or let us use their sewing patterns for the marathon, because there is a lot of valuable information in each and every single one of these videos that I guarantee will make you a better bag maker by the end of the marathon. So without further ado, let's get started. And before I forget, I would like to mention that the panels I am using today were in collaboration with K&A Custom Fabrics and Hardware. These are custom printed vinyl panels that were printed specifically for the Juice Carton Purse. So with that being said, please go and show them some love for me, because without them, these panels right here for this exact purse would not have been possible. So I am greatly appreciative of that. So now let's really get started. So in today's purse, your supplies are going to include the 4.5-inch bar clasp. I like to buy mine from Amazon in a 6-pack, and that's because I'm about to do some free ASMR right now. Anyway, I should have opened this before I started recording. Anyway, so I like to get mine from Amazon because they have the closed edges. I don't know if you can kind of see that. The edges are not sealed, but they're like, yeah, they're closed off. So you don't have just like your bare opening. I honestly think it gives it a nicer finish when these edges are closed, because I've seen some that don't have the edges and I'm not really a fan of it. So these ones tend to work really well. And then you are gonna need your 2D rings, your chain strap, your vinyl, of course, and your material for the interior. Now, interfacing is optional for the bag. I personally am not going to be using interfacing for today's bag. If you are working with a super lightweight vinyl, you might want to use something to interface it to reinforce it. If you're going to use a heavier weight vinyl, I would just kind of not be careful, but just keep in mind that the thicker the vinyl is, the harder it is to really manipulate, if that makes sense, especially when you're making a bag like this one. So the one I am using today with the panels is this medium weight, I would say, vinyl. It's just like your standard basic custom vinyl. It does have very good pliability and it's super soft. Feels light, but it has that good weight to it. I don't know if you can see that thickness. So this is a type of vinyl I use most often lately for my bag making. I love it because it holds structure well, and like I said, because it is a medium weight, I can really manipulate it the way that I need to. And for today's interior, I am also going to be using canvas. So I'll be right back. I have to go and cut these out really quick. And just a really quick tip as I'm cutting these out, I wanted to tell you, even if you're not using like these specially printed panels for the Juice Carton Purse, just make sure that your measurements are precise, especially the seam allowance. I do use a 1/4-inch seam allowance very specifically because you don't want any type of bunching or gaps when it's time to install the hardware. You really want that measurement to match up exactly. That way it just gives it a really nicer professional look and you don't have any overhang or anything like that. So just be mindful of that. I am going to remind you throughout the video. of your seam allowances and things like that. So. Okay, so I'm coming from this angle. We're gonna start off with the vinyl exterior panels first before we do the interior. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you. Ahead and grab my template for the side panels of the Juice Carton Purse. I'm gonna go ahead and lay them down and then I'll clip them into place. I don't always do this. A lot of the times I just wing it. But for the sake of the video, I'll do it, okay? I'll do it. So just like that, you wanna get your template, place it right down into your little square. And you're just gonna go ahead and sew it into place. The template really helps if you're looking for perfection. So I like to start from the bottom and then work my way around. Make sure that when you're sewing and you're about to turn the corner, always make sure that that needle is down. You never want to turn a corner with your needle up, so just be mindful of that. I know sometimes machines can have a mind of their own and they end up with the needle up as soon as you stop. So just make sure. Just make sure. And I am using a 3.5 stitch length for this part, and also throughout the construction of the bag. I normally don't like to use anything smaller than that just because when I'm working with vinyl especially, you don't want to perforate the vinyl at all because those stitch lines can become like tear marks on the paper. So just keep that in mind. What I do to one side panel, I'm going to do to the other. And also make sure that if you're working with a directional fabric like this one, make sure it's pointing the right direction. I've made the mistake before of putting it completely upside down and I had to go and seam rip everything. One time I even got the back panel and I put my strap connector on it and I had to just start all over. And we don't want that. So just keep that in mind. Be very mindful, pay attention to those type of things. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do the next one. Same exact way. Clip it down, that way it doesn't shift around anywhere. And repeat the same process here. Also, on the part where we're turning and we're gonna go down the final side, it can get a little bit stuck here because of the D-ring. It gets stuck under the presser foot, whether you're using an industrial machine or even a domestic machine. A hump jumper is really going to help you in the process, so that way you don't get any nesting or anything like that, or a messy stitch on the underside. So have one of those handy. I didn't today just because I am using my jerky. And the pattern is domestic machine friendly. And if you are going to use a domestic machine for it, just don't use anything too thick. You want your machine to not hate you. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now I have my two side panels ready and the bag is now ready to be assembled on the outside. So let's get to it. Now this is just a quick tip I'm going to show you. When we're sewing the panels together, because we're gonna sew them in a special sequence. So we're gonna do front panel because we have the front and back. Those are the two tallest panels that we have. So we do the front first, then we do a side panel, and then we'll do the back, and then we'll do another side panel. I'll show you that sequence right now. But because of that, you have a significant difference in height with these two. So with that, you're going to definitely want to just meet the bottoms, only the bottoms. Clip it into place. Now, if you don't feel confident in yourself, you can definitely use more clips than this. I normally don't, if I'm being honest with you. But for the sake of this video, I will today, okay? Sometimes I like to live dangerously. But anyway, right here in the pattern, I do tell you to go ahead and stitch down, starting from the top. But I do notice that a few of you were having trouble with like the bulking and stuff like that when you're sewing the interior to the exterior. In the future, we'll go over that. So something I found to alleviate that and to help the process a little bit better is creating your stitch line, starting it a little bit down here. I would say about 1/4 of an inch to maybe even a half, but even a half looks dramatic. So I would say like right about 1/4 inch or a little bit over that. If there's a specific measurement for that, please tell me. But for now, it's just gonna be slightly under that very top edge. We're not gonna start it right at the top here because we also do want to prevent tearing, and I'll go over that too. Now for this part, I am gonna be starting from the bottom and going upwards. Now if I'm working from the back, I can't really see where this starts and ends, so I am gonna do it from the bottom. It helps. So, and also be mindful of your 1/4 inch seam allowance. In the pattern, I do suggest that you actually draw out your seam allowance so that way you have a straight edge as a guide to follow. That way your seam allowance is the same all the way throughout. You don't have to worry about it. Me, on the other hand, like I said, we like to live dangerously out here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. Now, make sure you stop just a little bit before you get to the edge of that top right there. So I probably could have given it a little bit more, but I only did like this tiny little, you see that? So it's not completely sewn at the top. I still have like a little bit of a flap there, an edge, if that makes sense. So what you do there, you do to the next. So we're gonna grab our back panel. And another thing you can do so that way you don't get confused is actually numbering your panels. So your front can be number 1, the side panel could be number 2, the back could be 3, and then the final one could be number 4. This just helps you remember the sequence of which they have to go into because, like I said, I have sewn them the wrong way before. I've sewn the front to the back first instead of the front side back. So it was a whole mess. Just to avoid that, go ahead and definitely number them because it does help you to remember. Okay, so for this one, clipping it down, and this time we are gonna flip it over so that we're starting from this side and going down because you always want to have the shorter panel in sight. That way you can see what you're doing, where you're going, how far you're actually going, and whatnot. So again, I am starting right below the edge. I'm not going to start right at the edge because I know a few of you had trouble with the sides tearing once you got here, and that's because there's a lot of tension and a lot of stitching right there. It happens often with vinyl because vinyl can be so picky and we have to be careful with it because, like I said before, you don't want to perforate the vinyl. So just like that, I'm leaving it with another edge, just like I did here. And don't be too picky if you end up with like a longer edge here compared to here. It won't matter in the end because we are just going to use the same seam allowance when we sew the interior. So now I have 3 panels sewn together. Oops. Just like that. And we're going to go ahead and put on the final side panel. Make sure you line up your bottoms like I mentioned before, only the bottoms. You don't ever want to bring your side panels all the way to the top of the front and back panels. Don't do that to yourself. Okay. And again, because I have this one in sight, the side panel, the shorter panel, I'm going to start there. Be very mindful of your seam allowance because, like I said before, it really does have to be precise. Even if it's just a smidge off, it's okay, but you really don't want that overhang and you don't want any bunching when it's time to install your hardware. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now that you have all 4 panels, you're just going to bring that final panel to the back panel, or whichever panel you end up with. You're just going to clip them together and sew it, just like we did the rest of the panels. Yeah, I don't like to do too many back stitches because, again, vinyl, we all know how it can be. You don't go all the way to the top, just give it a nice, sweet little edge there. Okay, so now you can kind of see it taking its shape. Now for this next part, we are going to be doing the exterior bottom panel. Now this part is also done in a sequence, so that way you get a nice square bottom. Let me show you. So when I do sew this part, I'm going to do the top first and then the bottom. I'm going to do the side that's parallel to the last one that I did. This just creates a nicer bottom, in my opinion. It's more even as opposed to doing one side and the one next to it and then, you know, in a full square. I like to do the ones that are parallel to each other first. So just a helpful tip. I do tell you that in the pattern, but just because for the sake of the video. Now, you want your corners of your bottom panel to meet right at the corners of your panels there. Hello.
Hi.
How you doing? It helps to spread these sides out so that way they don't get into the way.
Yeah. So what? Okay. Yeah. Fluffy. Yeah. Yeah.
It's getting a call. Okay. So when you are sewing the panels, make sure that these side ones that you're not sewing are flared out and they're flattened. That way you don't get any type of bulking on the corners when you flip it right side out. Okay, so I have that one done, and now I'm gonna go ahead and do the one parallel to it. Not the one on the side, we're going to the one right across, like literally. So. Again, just make sure that those other panels that you haven't sewn are flattened out. That way they don't get caught into the stitch line. Okay, so now I just have my 2 sides right there sewn. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the remaining 2. So right here, like I said, when you're doing them, just make sure that they are lined up perfectly. You can mark your midpoints if you'd like to, just for extra help. But I just like to go and wing it, okay? a lot of shit in life I have winged or wound, whatever. But yeah, just like that, and then kind of like tug on these sides a bit so that way they lay completely flat. If that makes sense. And then just clip it down into place. I'll clip this one last. Sometimes you have to kind of get up in here with your fingers just to flatten it out. And another tip you're gonna want to consider is do not go from one end of the vinyl to the next. What you want to do is go from these lines that you created from the previous sides being sewn. You're gonna want to connect those. I don't know if you could see that. I didn't take it all the way to the edge. What I did was I started right at this very stitch line and I ended right at this very stitch line. Because again, you want that perfectly. Not perfectly, because no such thing as perfect, but you just want that nice square bottom, okay? Like SpongeBob SquarePants. Alright, so what we did to that panel, we're just gonna go ahead and do it to the next here. Just get it as straight as you possibly can. And then go ahead and sew. Okay, so now that you have your exterior complete, we're gonna go ahead and flip this baby inside out, or right side up. But while you're doing this, you don't want to pull too much on the vinyl. There's so much tension going on, especially up here. You don't want to, again, rip it or tear it. So be very careful on this step. So when you are going to flip it, try to do pushing as much as you possibly can. Pull a little bit here and there if you need to, but be mindful of the vinyl and just keep on pushing. Push, push. Very much like giving birth, I guess. So just push. Take a breather if you have to. This is also why I recommend using a more pliable vinyl. The thinner ones, of course, are going to be a lot easier to, mess with. But you never know with the thinner vinyls how they might act to this type of motion. And the heavier weight ones, they're going to definitely piss you off. So the stiffer the vinyl, the harder it is going to be to really manipulate it. So just keep that in mind. You guys can take a shot for every time I say keep that in mind. So there you have your exterior fully complete now. You pop those little corners out as much as you possibly can. And there you have it. See, you have a nice square bottom. Once we put in our bone structure, you'll see that it's a lot nicer. Okay, so what we do to the outside is what we're going to do to the inside. Now, there's only one exception to that, and that is doing the bottom panel to your interior. For the interior, we are leaving out the bottom panel, so just set it aside. We're not going to sew that until the very end, because that is what that's where we're going to be birthing our bag through. So that's going to be our birth canal. Okay. So anyways, what you do to the outside, we're going to do to the inside. So I'll be right back. I am using canvas. I like to use canvas or waterproof canvas because of the structure it gives. Ever since I started using waterproof canvas for my bag making, I've never went back to cotton or anything lesser than that, just because of the structure that it gives. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew these together. Okay, so now that we have our interior panels and our exterior done, girls, hey. So now that we have our interior and our exterior panels done, we're going to want to go ahead and kind of bunch this up a little bit, fold it in, or whatever you have to do. And we're going to insert it into our interior. You want to make sure that you have right sides together for both the exterior and the interior. Just like that. Bunch it up as much as possible and then kind of drop it in there, like so. Now this is why I said to leave the interior bottom off. We're not going to sew that just yet. So just keep that in mind. Now, right here, for this part, when you're going to be clipping your pieces in place, you want to make sure that your vinyl panels and also your interior panels are folded outwards. You do not want them to go this way, just because you're going to create this fold that can really affect the way the bag is finished. So make sure that you have every single side, every seam folded outwards. I'll be able to show you what I mean in a little bit. Now this does cause some bulk to form because of the way that I'm doing this, and especially depending on the materials you're using, it can create some bulk. So just like so, just make sure that they are folded outwards. Just like that. Can you see that? I hope you can see that. So, there you go. Now, we're going to go ahead and sew it down. Again, I am using a 3.5 stitch length. Nothing less and nothing more. You can definitely use more if you want to, but you might get like an exposed seam with a bigger seam stitch length. So again, be mindful of your seam allowance, 1/4 inch. You want it to kind of like line right up with that seam we already have right here. So use that as a guide if you didn't mark your seam allowance line or anything like that. I'm just gonna go ahead and sew, back stitch a little bit. Now for this part right here, when we get to this corner, I am gonna sew a U. I'm not gonna go ahead and touch right at that same line where I began the stitch on the corner when we were still assembling the panels together. I don't go all the way to that stitch, and I'll show you right now when I'm done. But I do a little bit of a turn, so that way it's at an angle, it's not completely straight. In the pattern, I do tell you to do a whole 90-degree angle. However, a few of you were kind of having trouble with the bunching when you turn the bag to be right side up. So, a really quick tip is to sew in a U shape compared to a sharp V or a sharp angle. You want it to be more of like a soft V compared to a point. Kind of like when you sew curves, it just relieves that tension that you don't want. So I like to do just two little stitch lines on that corner, and so that way it curves. And then I'll just go ahead and rotate And also straight down the side panels here. And I'll be able to show you what I mean right now. A closer look, if you must. Now, right when you get into the next corner, that next seam, just be careful and be mindful of your panels still facing outward. And again, I'm going at an angle, 1 stitch, 2 stitch. I am not going to meet that original stitch line. And then turn and sew as normal. Okay, so probably see it better from this point there. So you see how I went with a U rather than just a sharp point? That way it creates a slight curve, a softer look to it. So what I did there is what I'm going to go ahead and do on the other side as well. Again, this is just to alleviate that tension that a few of you might run into or have run into. Do your best not to go exactly like all the way down to that initial stitch. Now, if this is just your practice one, don't worry about perfection. Just like with everything else, you only get better with practice. And if you happen to fail at anything, it's only putting you a step closer to succeeding. So just keep that in mind. Now again, just be very mindful of your seam allowance, especially when you're sewing your panels. Because again, you really do not want any bunching up here or even any overhang when it's time to put your hardware in. So right here, again, like I said, we have our U-shaped corners. They are not meeting with the original stitch line here. Can you see that? So all of our corners have a U shape. Now, I do not recommend you do this next part because it can be very tricky or very intimidating, I would say, I guess, because you don't want to snip too much, okay? We're just trimming a little bit of the excess here on these corners. So that way, again, we can alleviate or eliminate some of that bulk and get rid of like the bunching. You have to be very careful you don't go all the way to that inside stitch line because you need this and you don't want to overdo it on the stitching. So very carefully just snip that corner at an angle, just like you would on a normal curve. You know when you want a curve to lay nicely and you do those little snips? Same thing applies here. So I'm just going and I'm taking it very carefully. I'm not even taking it all the way to the stitch line, like I don't want to get that close. Now for this next part, I am going to go ahead and just trim off the excess for this portion here very carefully. Again, if you have like super sharp scissors, be careful, and then especially with the dull ones, because with the dull ones you do have to put a lot more force, so just be careful. Something to keep in mind. And I do also trim a little bit off the sides and then going downward just like that. See, now you're gonna get like a much nicer edge. So what I did there, I'm gonna go ahead and do over here as well. It helps if you just kind of fold this taller panel down so you get a better view. And then just go ahead and snip, snip, cut, cut. And you go around the edge if you can, very carefully. And then this side as well. Okay. I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit. That way. I'm just gonna stop before I end up snipping my thread. Okay, so now that you have your bag basically already almost fully assembled, we're gonna go ahead and flip it right sides out. Now, before I move forward, make sure that your tops are open. We are not sewing these shut just yet. Okay, you leave these open because these will be the openings that you insert your cardboard into. So when you're sewing the panels together, the exterior to the interior, you're only going from the tops down. You're not going all the way across and then down. You're just leaving that open on both sides. Believe me, you are gonna want that to make your life a little bit easier. So here we go. We're just gonna go ahead and push, push. You see, this is why I said leave the bottom open, because this is literally your birth canal. So just push, push, push. And you're gonna wanna pop out those corners. Make sure you're not too rough with it, because again, it is vinyl. Push. I'm gonna like pull this one out. There we go. Same thing here. Okay. Yes, honey. Go ahead. So once you do that, you're just gonna go ahead and shove your interior down into a bag. Make sure all of your corners look nicely. Make that, kind of roll those seams in with your fingers, pop them out, just like we do with any other bag. Just like that. Okay, and then this would also be the perfect opportunity to measure your top to make sure your hardware is going to fit nicely. If it doesn't, even if it's slightly off, don't worry. Don't worry, the cardboard will kind of help it go into place. There we go. Now what you'll end up with is this really nice little bag. Now if you notice, the bag does not have a carton shape. It's gonna be a lot more flimsy and less of the shape it's supposed to be without that cardboard structure. Now I know you might think, oh my god, who puts cardboard in a purse? I know, the idea sounds crazy at first, but do not knock it until you try it. Okay, I promise it makes such a huge difference in the way that the bag is shaped. And with this specialty bag, you really want that shape to tell what it is. And obviously with cardboard, it's living up to its name. So yes. Okay, so I do use a shipping box type of cardboard. So I already did like a pre-fit to make sure that everything was gonna fit inside. And I do like to also make a pre-bend on the top, so that way when I do have it inside, it kind of already naturally wants to take its shape. So that's only about like 3.5 inches down from the top. Now you are going to want to trim as needed. You want it to have a pretty snug fit. Nothing too crazy, but you want it to really just fit right into there because you want the walls to support one another. Now this is why I said to leave your tops open, because this is where we're inserting the front and back panels first. I do the front and back panels first because it's just easier when I'm going to install the side cardboard pieces. So what we do to that part, we're going to do to the front as well. Just like so. See, so it's kind of already taking its shape, not 100% yet, but yes. And then just a quick suggestion, if you happen to want these to stay in place because of the motion that it takes on when opening and closing, putting a rivet here can help you, especially if you don't have access to like a cylinder machine, a cylinder eye, because I know a top stitch does look a lot nicer and stuff like that, but when you have your cardboard in, it's a little bit harder to maneuver under the machine. Now I suppose you could do it before you put in your cardboard, but then the seam kind of gets in the way there. So just something to consider. Okay, so now that I have those ones in, I'm gonna go ahead and put in my sides. So like I said, I did already do a pre-fit. You can tell right here that I was messing with it. So for the sides, you are gonna want to pull out your interior. That way you have your opening here, and you're just gonna go ahead and pop that baby in. Just pop it in. You'll be able to see like a clear view of what's going on in there. Just like that. Should be able to get a clear view. And then put in the other side. Lay it in there. Like I said, you do want it to be kind of a snug fit, so that way the interior, the bowing structures are supporting one another. And then another thing you will want to do is when you're putting in your cardboard, you'll want it to be in between the vinyl seams and not the interior seams. So you'll see when those fold, it kind of makes like two sides almost. Just make sure that you are pushing up against the exterior with that. Now, for this next part, I do tell you to create your bottom piece just regular like this. But if you want a little bit more support for those standing walls so that they're not like pushing in too much, you want some extra support, you are gonna do the square bottom, and then you're gonna add on an inch all the way around. So just like go ahead, measure an inch outward, so that way you end up with something with the bottom that has walls, just like this. And you are gonna wanna cut out each and every one of those corners. Just be mindful of your 1 inch. So once I have that, I'm just gonna go ahead and shove that baby in there. Work it through the bottom. Again, going through the birth canal. And you're just pushing it all the way down. You want this part to be really pushed into your panels. That way it's actually doing what it's supposed to. So once you have that inside, you are going to just push down your interior. Just push that down into the bag. Push it down. You want to pull on that lining so that way it kind of hugs the cardboard a little bit. Again, this is where I do recommend putting a rivet on after you put in the cardboard. That way it all just holds into place. Girls! Okay. And then here too, you can also see how your corners are lining up, not lining up, but they are laying a lot more smooth, and you don't have any bunching there, so kind of hard to tell. I don't know if you can or not. Take a good look. Okay. So now that we've done that, we are going to go ahead and let this shape this bag before we go any more forward. I'm just gonna go ahead and shape it the way that it needs to be. So the way I like to do this is I just grab it front and back like this, and I push the sides in like so. So you can already see that my pre-fold that I made beforehand is already helping there because it's naturally taking that carton shape. You just want to kind of push on it a bit like that. Don't make any more bends than you need to because then it kind of makes it a little more wonky. But you see that? How it takes its shape because you are pushing it down. So just like that. Now for this next step, we are going to go ahead and top stitch along the openings that we made here. Don't worry about it being perfect. You just have to make sure that they are both kind of even. You just don't want any shifting while you're installing your hardware. You want everything to be just in one place there. Now I already bent my cardboard. I'm gonna have like an extra bend there, but that's okay. So, like so, just gonna keep it like that. And also, if you need to trim your cardboard so that it's not in this stitch line, go ahead and do so. I don't want your machine to hate you or try to kill you with the flying needle, okay? So just be mindful of that, okay? So now this part coming up next, we're gonna see how our hardware is going to fit. So like I said, you don't want any bunching or anything like that, or even any type of overhang. So this is like a very slight amount of overhang over here, just right there. So this is, you don't really want it to shift, just make sure, this is very minimal, so I'm okay with it. But you wanna make sure your seams, your seam allowance on the inside when doing the interior and exterior, be very precise with your 1/4 inch because like I said, you don't want any issues with the hardware. There we go. Okay, so the bar that has the actual little clasp here, you want that on the back side. That's the part that's gonna open and close and lock the purse. Now this side with the hole on it is gonna go on your front. That's the nicer, it's supposed to be the nicer side. And also another thing to consider is make sure your screw holes are on the inside of the bag. You don't want them facing outward because then you're just gonna end up with the whole entire mess. Just be very, very mindful of that. I know it can get confusing, especially when you're kind of like in the maker mode and you're just boom, 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 going at it, because it's happened to me before where I just skip a whole step where I'm not paying attention. But I'm reminding you right now, keep your screw holes on the inside when you're installing this. So once you have it all fit and it's gonna be on there the way it needs to, you see that everything is in place, it's gonna work properly, you're gonna go ahead and mark your hole here at the top. Now I just use a basic ink pen. I don't use anything fancy. or whatever for this part. Well, I usually use a pen if I can find it. But you get the... And another thing, just make sure that you have it centered. You really don't want it off-centered, especially with these bar clasps, because it can really set a purse like off balance, if that makes sense. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now I have my hole marked. I'm just gonna go ahead and snip it. I'm not gonna cut the exact shape. What I like to do personally is just snip on the very sides of it, like that. Now, if you have your cardboard inside this seam, it will get a little bit thicker and it will get tricky. But I'm just going ahead and I'm carefully snipping along the line. You want your opening big enough for your clasp to go through. Just like that. Once you do that, then your hardware is ready to be installed and screwed into place. Oh wait, you're gonna need a little bit of glue for that part actually. You are gonna need a dab of, or a few dabs of glue. I do like to use liquid stitch. I did once use super glue, but I don't recommend that if you are a new sewist because it does get messy. And if you have to move your hardware or whatever, do not use super glue. So use something that's gonna bond the vinyl and the canvas into your bar hardware nicely. So after you've done that, you're gonna go ahead and just screw them on. Again, make sure your screw holes are on the inside. Okay, so now you have your purse hardware installed on the top. Play with it a little bit, take it into shape, make sure everything lands in the right spots where it's supposed to be. So now you should end up with a house looking top, just like that. Now, this next part, we are going to be sewing on the bottom interior panel. Now this does involve binding once you have it done, but it's very minimal and it's just straight edges, so you don't have to worry about it being curved or anything like that. But using a lot of clips to hold it into place really does help. And for this part, you do want wrong sides together because we're gonna bind it anyway. You're just gonna clip it. And we are gonna work it the same way that we did the exterior, where we did one side first, and then we do the side that's parallel. And also during this process, you wanna make sure that your two side panels are not going anywhere or shifting around in there. Using double-sided tape will kind of help. So, go ahead and just, and then we're gonna go ahead and just sew it all around. So there you now have your very own Juice Carton Purse, or carton of Beetlejuice per se, with all the little details and all of that. I can't tell you how many times I get stopped whenever I wear my own out and about. Wherever I go, somebody always wants a closer look or they want to know where I got it, because every detail on this bag is seriously just so amazing. And it's a showstopper for sure. After watching this video, I am confident that you will also have the confidence to make this bag, that you are encouraged and motivated even more now to create one of your own. And so many amazing prints, whatever prints you guys find, I want to see your creativity come to life with these, honestly. So if you're not part of my sewing pattern group, I will link that down below in the description box, as well as my Instagram, because I really do love and enjoy seeing all of your beautiful creations come together. It brings me a lot of happiness to see other makers use my patterns and just being so creative with them. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye. Okay, so if you made it this far, I would like to gift away a whole entire box kit for the Juice Carton Purse pattern by K&A Custom Fabrics and Hardware. I did purchase this from my own pockets, and this is just my little treat to those of you who leave me a comment down below and subscribe to my channel, as well as everyone else's channels that are involved. I am going to be choosing a winner from the comments down below. So just tell me something that inspires you, what keeps you going, and why. Like, what is your why is what I want to know. But in this box kit, it does come with one set of panels. So you have the exterior and the interior, just like we did here. You do get your purse chain strap in gunmetal black, which is pretty awesome. And also your bar clasp with the screws included. So that also comes in the gunmetal black. Your binding for the bottom panel, as well as two gunmetal black D-rings for the strap connectors. And even as a special treat, which is pretty awesome, is an exclusive Beetlejuice emblem logo for you to pop onto your bag. Like, how freaking awesome is that? I wish I could keep this for myself, okay? I'm not. I should have got one. But I don't know. If you really wanted to, you can just pop it wherever you want. Like, honestly, this thing is badass. It's just so cool and so awesome. So that is what I have for a gift away prize for those of you who watched my video all the way through. I really do appreciate you, and it is just my way of gifting back.